I'm Ray Kroner. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I own Kroner Dry Cleaners.
Very nice. Ray, when and where were you born?
I was born on the west side of Cincinnati in 1960.
What neighborhood technically were you born in?
It would be considered Cheviot on the west side of Cincinnati.
Very cool. Did you like growing up there?
I did. Small town community. It was a post-World War II typical small town community, tight-knit housing, anchored by a small business district, which was very instrumental in our family history. So it blended well with our surroundings.
Very nice. Who is in your immediate family?
I am the seventh of eight. My brother Lou is the oldest, and then Mark and Julie, Joe, Mary, Paul, myself, and then my sister Kathy.
Are you guys Catholic by any chance?
How did you guess? Wait, did I say west side of Cincinnati?
You said west side, and then I heard all the names, and I was like, oh,
yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. 8 kids.
Yes.
What were your parents' names?
Lou Jr. and Ann.
Great. So you all grew up there together. Can you tell me about sort of the origins of the business and how your family got involved and about your parents?
My grandfather was a tailor in the 1920s, and he ran a successful business, and the emphasis of his business was vest making for a larger tailoring company, which was not unusual at that time. There were small divisions that did the trousers, the coats, and the vests. And as you know, the 20s were a time of affluence where, women, the signature piece was a flapper dress. Men wore wide pinstripe suits with wide legs, cuffs, vests, wide lapels. It was a statement of economic times. And that was the 20s, and of course that was changing because the Great Depression came on about in 1929, lasted till 1941. And Grandpa realized at that time that vests were sort of evaporating from the fashion statement. So he had to make this decision whether he was going to go into a different avenue of the tailoring business or go into this fairly new concept of dry cleaning. And after a discussion with my dad and my uncle, they decided to open up a dry cleaning establishment in 1939. At that time, it was called Cheviot Dry Cleaners and Tailors. My dad came out of the Army, and he was Lou Jr., and he was well aware of the sense of community, and he was really a perfect fit for the post-World War II small housing communities based around anchors of the small business district and churches. And with that awareness, he thought it was important to put your name on your business to show a sense of familiarity and a sense of pride in your work. So then they changed the name to Lou Kroner and Sons Dry Cleaners in the late 40s. Business was, I moved along very successfully from the late 40s, post-World War II, in the 50s and the 60s. Things changed as we got into the 60s. There was a social awareness change, and that came with the late 60s and into the 70s came with 3 defining events that I think took us to a new trajectory in our business. There was, first, it was the polyester phase. Polyester was fairly new, and it came out, and we could see that through the disco era, bright colors. Polyester was forgiving. It didn't need much care. That directly affected the dry cleaning industry because now people didn't need to go to the dry cleaner, where once they were wearing seasonal clothes. In the winter, they were wearing cashmere, wool, those type of materials. And in the summer, they were wearing cotton and seersuckers and linens, which all needed a lot of care. All of a sudden, that wasn't the case, and people were wearing clothes that didn't have seasons, and they didn't need the care. So at that time, roughly 30% of the dry cleaning industry was gone. That comes also after that was the awareness of chemical of ill effects on both the air quality and the ground. And dry cleaning chemicals were part of that story. And so ironically, when you have a period of time when people are looking at buying polyester fabrics, which are oil-laden fabrics that are going to outlast us all somewhere in a landfill, now the EPA is also saying, oh, by the way, these contaminants are here. Let's focus on these. So the industry then had to go and we took a big hit and a publicity part. People now thought we handled contaminants. And I believe that our industry was probably remiss a little bit in not promoting ourselves a little more on the efforts we were making to handle things professionally. When handled professionally, we understood how to handle the chemicals so they weren't contaminant issues. And also we needed to learn from that. And over the years we've made great adaptations as an industry and as an individual company. I don't want to
What was the third defining event? Polyester, EPA regulations, and...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, and the first one was malls. The first mall that came into the country was 1956 in Minnesota, in our immediate area. Swifton Commons came in the late 50s. Kenwood Mall and Western Hills Plaza came in 1965. Northgate came in 1972. Malls were the shiny new toy. Everybody was drawn to them because you could get corporate backing. Pricing was different, and it really depleted the sense of the small business district. So that was a big anchor for communities, and it was obviously an anchor for businesses. And whereas it didn't have a big effect on us, but all the business around us, all of a sudden, there were vacant signs. And then when you lose your anchor, then people have more of a natural tendency to maybe move to other outer areas because they don't need that sense of community in the traditional manner. So I say when people say the neighborhood is changing, a lot of times it comes with a racial component. And in this case, it wasn't racial. It was the neighborhood is definitely changing because the anchor now left. So that was a big battle for us. Fortunately, my dad and grandpa had established a delivery route on a small level. So we were already going to some outlying areas, not real big, but our footprint wasn't great. But we were in the right track. So that would have been the first. That would have been the first thing.
No, that's fascinating. I love that you not only know your Cincinnati local history, but like more broadly social movements and also fashion and textile history. That's fascinating, those intersections. I didn't consider this as a part of
if you look
this.
at the 80s, you think about big hair, wide shoulder pads. Those are all signs of economic success. And then when it's not, you look at just the Depression, people wore muted colors, very narrow ties, very narrow lapels. The women wore pencil skirts. They were understated. There wasn't anything flamboyant about it. Mm-hmm. So it is fascinating. The two things are directly related. Perchloroethylene was the go-to chemical. It's still, everybody grades everything to perc. Kinetic clean is good as perc, et cetera. But it was a known carcinogen. I mean, it was, now, we were making efforts. We used equipment that was called reclaimers because we were reclaiming the product. It was very expensive, and so you didn't want to get rid of it. You wanted to maintain as much as you could. Well, maintaining it is keeping it isolated, making sure gaskets are tight, making sure it's in enclosed components. During the time when the EPA was making their hard, stringent regulations in the 80s, we went from transfer machines to clothes to dry to dry machines. You put the clothes in dirty, they come out dry. There's no more exposure to the chemical. And then eventually there was enough time for research to find that there were alternative solutions. So now I'm using a product called K4. It was developed in Germany. It's now being produced in Wisconsin. 88% corn. It's biodegradable. It's halogen free. That means it'll break up in the ground and it won't, the component of a chlorinated as perchlor, and that compound stayed solid. It would shrink into the earth and it would just sit there. Now these new components break up and they're biodegradable and they're not hazardous. They're $66 a gallon. We don't want to lose an ounce of it. So it's not only good environmental awareness, but it's good business sense to protect that product and get the equipment and make sure that the equipment is maintained and you're keeping it in virgin state for cleaning capacity and you're keeping it around because you don't want to be buying it on a regular basis. If you get into wedding gowns with a lot of tulle, a lot of layers, bead trims are always a challenge, and you have to be aware of them. Back in the 80s, when they made wedding gowns, they put beads on them, and they were made of polystyrene. And it's the same component that a foam cup is made out of. And it dissolves in dry cleaning fluid. And nobody told us that. And the manufacturer didn't know it either.
No.
So it was a very unique problem. Just like back in the 80s, suit coats, there's a interfacing to give the suit coats its look. And manufacturers started realizing, hey, they could cut the corners and glue that down. And then they glued it in. Well, over time, it would create bubbles and waves. And then you had to really, it wasn't our problem, but because it was on our counter, it became our problem. So we had to get it correct for the customer, but then you had to explain to the customer. We were able to correct it through proper pressing and sizing and stuff, but you had to explain to the customer, this is going to come back, and this is a problem that is manufacturer related.
Right.
And the manufacturers got enough. We got in the ear, that's what I say, with the DLI, who is an advocate for the industry, would talk to manufacturers and say, hey, look, we've got dry cleaners all over the country who have the same problem. And so it's not the dry cleaning issue. The issue is probably in construction. And so that was a great thing for the organization to have. The manufacturers came and corrected. Well, we are now starting to see that same problem come back now 40 years later. And somebody probably was, well, I think right now regulations are a taboo word. And I'm not a fan of that. I think things need to be regulated, and I probably would have the wrath of most of my business buddies come down on me for saying that. But I think if you're doing things right, you don't need to be regulated. And if you're not doing things right, then you need to be regulated. And we're now in a point of time where people don't think I think regulation's a bad word. And that's when you find yourself in environmental problems, and that's when you find yourself in quality problems. And if we're true, proud Americans, we want to put out a quality piece.
So how did you get involved in the family businesses? Did you know this was something you always wanted to do? Was it just expected that you would?
No, it was not expected. My dad did not put that pressure on us. I am the seventh of eight, as I said. All my older siblings worked through high school and college in the business, and they moved on. I was drawn to it because it was a personal relationship type business. I probably was just wild enough to know that I didn't like to have too many bosses. So my dad and my grandpa were enough. But I like the challenge of it. I came in 1978, and I always think back, and I was aware of this at the time. We just there's the 3 stories I told you, the malls coming in and depleting the small business district, polyester coming in and changing the dry cleaning industry, and then of course your EPA regulations coming in and changing this even further. And that all took place in the early 70s, and in 1978 I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. Welcome myself into all these problems. So it was fun, and it still is.
Nice, yeah. And it seems like you all have been as successful as a business since. After some of those things like EPA regulations and malls, how do you feel like what's the strategy to survive?
Well, the first thing when I came on is, we said we need to expand our delivery routes. The mantra, location, 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 didn't make a whole lot of sense. We thought if we could go to somebody's home and provide service instead of a location, 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 it's now location, location, location. We can come right to your home and provide that service, and we are in a service-oriented industry, and that was one of the first things we wanted to accomplish, and we developed our routes, started growing. Nothing we did was a home run. I always like to say in baseball vernacular, I hit singles, and we have to be happy with that. But we continue. We're at 87 years. We're still growing and still looking at new things. That was the first big change when I came on. The second was, and it's something that's still happening, is we're still exploring new technologies, new equipment, new solvents, and of course we continued to grow our delivery routes. We developed a relationship with the arts community in the city. So now we do the work for the Playhouse, Shakespeare, the opera, the Aronoff. I'm trying to think who.
He said the ballet.
Ballet. I knew I was missing somebody. Yeah.
All your big client
Yes.
shout-outs.
Yeah, so I love what the arts community does for a city, and it's fun to be part of being part of what they bring to make our city unique. The newer generation is aware of sustainability, and it's a conversation we have a lot in our industry. People are becoming more aware of that. Now that comes with a cost. Mm-hmm. And fast fashion, cheap, and people, if they don't like it, they throw it out. But then if they're conscious about the earth, they know that when they throw it out, it's going into a landfill, and it's going to outlive us all. If you buy a nice signature piece of your wardrobe, you take care of it.
And you can wear that piece
and
for a long
you can
time.
wear it for a long time,
Yeah.
if it's handled correctly.
Cool. Yeah, I hope not only for the fashion industry, but for your business as well, that it shifts back into that. Do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, and it's if we're responsible about being stewards of the earth, we have to, not about dry cleaning, just we got to look at what we're doing in life and say, listen, we need to change our habits, and it's not all about what's convenient and what's fast.
Do you think that the pandemic has kind of shifted things
Well,
back
yes,
in the
yeah, I'm
small
sorry.
business
Yeah, the
mindset?
pandemic, people were very conscious about supporting small businesses because they realized how tenuous that situation was. And, I mean, in our industry, we lost 20% of the dry cleaners at that time. The big story is always restaurants when you look at how restaurants suffered. But there are a lot of other businesses that suffered as well during the pandemic.
Do you have any stories or things that were sort of passed down about any like family lore or business lore that you find interesting?
I'm trying to think of. I do laugh. My grandpa grew up my parents, they all grew up in the Depression, and you fought for everything you got, and I think that mentality carried on in generations. And I think I think all my siblings and we all kind of have that fight in us as well. I always said, Grandpa was a tailor, It didn't work. He was 40 years old. He had to change direction when he thought he was probably established. The first day he opened in 1939, he took in one pair of pants. So the fight was real. The battle was real. And I think that carried over in his and my dad's mentality and their direction in business. My dad was very community oriented. He was active in the business association. He was active in the community. He was active in his church. And that just played right into the hand of the small business mantra and the connections that people have. And as you said earlier, you're the face. You've got a face with a business. We're not, we've gotten so far away from that. First it was big malls, and they came and they took away from the small business district. Then big box stores wiped out malls. Now Amazon's and your mail-in stores are wiping out the big box stores. But the one consistent that keeps hanging in there is a small business guy. So fight is in our nature.
What impact do you think that the dry cleaning business has had on Cincinnati or on Cheviot or on the community?
Well, I think by the very nature of what we do is very personal. I mean,
Gross.
People probably don't think about it, but even before you speak, we look at what you're wearing and we can already form an opinion of that. Good, bad, different, whatever it is. But those fabrics speak to your personality. And so when you bring your fabrics to us, consciously or subconsciously, you're bringing in a piece of your personality and say, make sure I look good in this the next time I wear it. So I think that's a big part of who we are. I just had this conversation. I'm on a national committee. I'm the vice president of the Dry Cleaning and Laundry Institute, and it's an international organization. And I was just on a Zoom call with people from all around the country prior to coming here, and we were talking about the community things that we do. We do coat drives. I clean flags for free as a patriotic motion. We clean Santa suits for free because we know Santa's out there just promoting goodwill. Simple things like that, coat drives can be a big thing to help the needy out in the end. So, and whatever other projects or gifts, or people are always looking for gift certificates, small things like that. So we are invested in the community in a lot more ways than just hoping that people bring their dirty clothes to us. Yeah, it's the Dry Cleaning and Laundry Institute. And I grew up on it. My dad, as small as we were, my dad was always a member of this organization. Back then it was the International Fabric Care Organization or Institute. But he always had journals sitting on the desk, and that is how I learned the trade, because I was constantly reading and whatever journal was available, or there are all kind of textile analysis bulletins, things that teach you about the fabric. So anything about the industry, from the front counter to the boiler room and anywhere in between, can be learned through this organization. And I grew up on that. That's what I learned from. And now that I've reached a point where I've got a little more time, I decided I was asked to join the board, and I joined the board. And now I'm moving up in the ranks. So I'm glad to give back to the industry that had provided me with so much education.
Cool. Yeah, you are really entrenched in,
Yes.
in the industry. Yeah. When you said you learned a lot from these journals and things too, did you get a lot of training from your family, from your dad, from your uncle?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember working with them?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, definitely.
What was that like?
My dad was a great teacher. He would sit back and let you talk through things, and over time, he knew that I was interested in taking over, so he let me walk through things. And I always had this joke, because I would come up with an idea, and he would challenge it, and it would take 6 months to come to fruition. So in 1986, we were looking at computer system. It was a whole new software system for the industry. We were maybe one of the first 4 or 5 cleaners in the city to go with this. And I really was all in on it. And this was 40 years of not how we did it and a big change. But he let me breathe. It was 6 months, and we adapted it. And when I look through times, since I've been in the business, we've done 4 additions, 5 additions. I put in a second location in Mount Adams. We've done a lot of changes, and each came with this 6-month period of, are you sure that's what you want to do? And I think, in hindsight, it was his way of making sure that I had vetted all the questions. Early on, I used to think, my God, he doesn't want to change. What's going on here? But in reality, I think he was challenging me to make sure that I answered all the questions before it took place.
Yeah, making sure you made smart business decisions.
So I have great respect for that, yes. Yeah.
Were you and your dad close?
Yes.
Yeah. Very nice. Did you stay close with your siblings as well through this?
Oh yeah, we're very tight.
Family.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask you too? Do you have children? What's the future of the business? Who's going to run
We
it?
have 2 daughters, and there's a part of me, and we have a lot of these discussions. I feel like I steered my daughters away from the business because it was very labor intensive. And for a long part of my life, I worked 60 plus hours a week. I don't do that anymore. We've reached a point. When I started, we had 6 employees, and 4 were family members. And through the years, with growth, I now have 26 employees, and it's given me some more flexibility just by the nature of the numbers. But I'm still embedded. But my daughters are both very successful. My youngest daughter does my bookkeeping for me, and she will be part of my succession plan.
What's her name?
As I mentioned earlier, my wife taught at an all-girls Catholic school, Mercy High School, for 25 years, and we started developing. She would go and find young girls who wanted to work for us and who needed the money and were going to stay in town for college and maybe needed some help and some guidance. And then I developed this great group of young ladies over the 25-year period who worked for me. And one of them was a girl that worked for us through high school and college, and she got her degree and went out into the corporate world and hated it. And we had a discussion, and I said, you got to have a plan. And she said, well, I want to come back and work for you. And it was at this time that I was looking to find somebody in her role. I love the idea of having somebody in their youth who understood social media and understood the new dynamics of the way we communicate. Because as much as I think I know, I'm now the old guy. So she's on board, and she will be part of our succession plan. And it feels real good.
Very nice. What's her name?
Sammy.
Sammy. And what are your daughters' names?
Emily and Jenny. And Emily's with us. Jenny is, I go to her a lot. She's a marketing aide. She works for a marketing company. She works for an IT company. She's in marketing. She's got a very savvy head. So I draw on her knowledge a lot. So it's fun to have that relationship.
Do any of your siblings, any of their children are currently part of the business, or do they still work with you?
Nope.
Cool.
My sister worked with me for about 12 years, and she moved on. But now it's me.
It's all you. Nice. Do you have any great successes or accomplishments you'd like to share or talk about? Anything really big that stands out to you?
No, if I could talk about the pandemic, we just touched on that briefly. The pandemic was such a unique time for businesses. And I think, as time goes on, we'll start realizing how impactful it was. at the time, when they told us businesses would be shut down, that's a pretty big shock to your system. You've done this thing your whole life, and now it's not, you're watching business die because of something, where you go and you analyze yourself and say, what did we do wrong? What should we do? And how should we change? This was well beyond us. My original thought was, wow, my grandpa went through this in the Depression. Now, I know that was a far more impactful than this, but at the time, who knew? Because we were going to be closed for 2 weeks. But when you look at your numbers and you go, wow, we were down 50% over last week, and we don't, we were considered, as an industry, we were considered essential because nobody knew if this virus was on close. Should it be cleaned out? We didn't know. I had a lot of conversations with ROTC and National Guard because they were going to come in and, for a while, if you remember, they were housed and they were ready but they were going to need their clothes cleaned and cared for. So we were busy making a lot of those conversations. But I also had 25 people working for me, and I felt responsible for them. And we went from, I had monthly meetings, and we talk about everything business related, and then went to having daily meetings because people were scared. They didn't know where the next paycheck was going to come. They didn't know where they stood, and I had to lay people off, and I've never done that before. And I laid 5 people off, and they were crushed. But then the government came back and said we're going to give people who are unemployed the $600 a week stipend, and then the people who were working for me were going, wait a minute, we're working and they're making $600? So now we had this dynamic, and we had a government that didn't know how to lead, and I could go on and on about that, but if you don't get solid leadership from the top, it causes nothing but dissension. And I took just a little bit of leadership I have and told the people that are with me, we're going to make it through this, and we're going to be, and we try to stay the peace and stay calm. But it was a real challenge. It took a year and a half to get back to where we were, but the whole world changed. People were working from home, so that means they only had to wear a shirt for a Zoom call, no more pants. So that was a very unique time.
Yeah, that was a very unique time.
And it was for everybody. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say we're alone in this story, but everybody, it's just fascinating what we went through in the uncertainty.
Do you feel like you've bounced back since, or what do you feel like has stuck from that time that you're still doing?
Well, we've bounced back, and I think a lot of it is attrition. There are fewer dry cleaners around now because the marginal guys, if you were struggling beforehand, you weren't going to make it. And, the government supplemented money, and that sort of just kicked the can down the road because eventually you were going to struggle. We were fortunate in a fiscal sense, we're conservatives. And so I didn't have a lot of debt. That's kind of how I lived my life. And I was fortunate that when the time came, I wasn't beholden to a lot of people. I know a lot of guys, a lot of cleaners had 10, 15 locations that they were all leasing and renting, and that rent was still due, and they were down, a lot of these guys were down 60, 70%. I was fortunate at 50. So that we were fortunate because we were maybe, because I hit singles that hit home runs.
You did talk a little bit about challenges too, and of course related to the pandemic. Any other kind of major challenges you can cite? You already said malls, polyester, EPA, and the pandemic.
Well, it's funny because right before the pandemic, I was exploring alternative cleaning solutions, and there are certain times, for the most part, as a business owner, you just keep your head down and you try to run under the radar of the government. But there were a couple instances where we worked well with the government, and this one is before the pandemic, I was researching alternative solvents, and there was an organization in Ohio called the Ohio Air Quality Authority Division. I don't know if I had that right, but they were providing established companies with a percentage if you were going to go and buy something that was a biodegradable, earth-friendly product. And so with the government, it takes time for this development, and that's maybe years. And we were ready I was ready to go up to Columbus and make a presentation before the board to try to secure these funds. And then the pandemic came, and that conversation got cut off. But they called me in March. I know, they called me in May. And they said I was far enough along in the process, they wanted to grandfather me in. So I had this conversation with them now via Zoom rather than in person. And they approved the money, and I was going to get 30%, which is beautiful, but it was still going to cost me $100,000. So the week prior to that, I went to the bank to get my PPP loan, if you're familiar with that, from the pandemic. And for us, it was $100,000. And I went to the bank and I said, I've applied for this $100,000. They said, that's fine. And I said, okay. Well, then the Ohio Air Quality Group calls, and I'm approved, and now I can buy this equipment. Well, I just borrowed $100,000 to cover loss of business. My business is down 50%, and I go back to the banker and I said, hey, can you lend me $100,000 for equipment? And he said, sure. So that was a scary moment, because you're putting in equipment and you're putting in it with a vision of the future, but you're not real sure where the future is because you've been you were sidetracked. But the fun part of that story for me is I was dealing with a small local banker would be a small business person. And I don't want to ever knock the big guys, but I know the wheel moves a lot slower, and the people who were working with some of the bigger banks, nothing moved. They couldn't get funding. They couldn't get their PPP loans. They were really struggling because they had to go up the chain of a national bank, whereas I knew this guy personally, and it comes right back to that small business connection. So
that feels like good karma.
Please?
That feels like good karma.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting, yeah. What are the future plans for the dry cleaning business? What are your hopes for the business? To sustain, to grow, to?
Just last year we put in some new equipment, which is based on growth. We're always looking at new marketing strategies. I believe there are going to be fewer dry cleaners in the future, but the ones that are here will have more potential for growth. The weekly customer maybe is now the monthly customer. The monthly customer is now maybe semi-annually, but we're drawing from a larger area, because if I've got customers that come from Lebanon because they want it done right. And they don't need it every week, so they just come in once a month, and things like that. So I think we'll be around, and we are setting ourselves up to maintain the attention to detail and the quality that I grew up with, and that's the mantra that we constantly talk about with our team, and I see a bright future.